I'm glad you made it this far. I know many of you may not have heard all of the story that Dan discloses in this interview, unlike the possibilities of false flag agents that we're presented with today. The late 90s and early 2000s didn't have any that were presented to us as Area 51 was still considered to be a highly taboo classified subject. One thing I'm sure you've realized is there are certain points discussed in this interview that are the same as we've heard in the past from other early whistleblowers discussing the alien's name. Bill Uhouse served 10 years in the Marine Corps as a fighter pilot and 4 years with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He testifies in this interview from 2000 that the first disc the U.S. government tested was a re-engineered ET craft that crashed in Kingman, Arizona in 1958. He further testifies that the ETs presented a craft to the U.S. government. This craft was taken to Area 51, which was just being constructed at the time, and the 4 ETs that accompanied the craft were taken to Los Alamos. I hope all of you stay tuned to the end, and if you're not already subscribed to the Storyist, I invite you to please do so for more of this type of content.
Actually raised. We had a long period of introduction into meetings, say an EVE, an alien. And I called him J-Rod. Of course, that's what they called him, but that wasn't his, I don't know if that was his real name or not, but that's the name that the linguist gave him, so he knew J-Rod, And I did draw a sketch of him when he was, before I left him in a meeting, but, I provided it to some people, but that was my impression of what I saw.
How much individual contact did you have with him?
Oh, he used to come in with Teller and some of the other guys occasionally on questions that maybe we'd have, But you got to understand that everything was, specific to the group. If it wasn't specific to the group, you couldn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
need to know.
And and he would talk, but he'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like you. He's like one of the, a parrot, but he'd try and answer your question, A lot of times you'd have a hard time understanding, because if you didn't put it on paper and explain yourself, half the time he couldn't give you a good answer.
When you said there was a long build-up to actually meeting this person, what was the preparation like before you actually had a chance to have personal contact?
Well, the preparation was, basically going through, first of all, I went through all of the different nationalities in the world, right? Just, these, whatever,
Human nationalities.
Yeah, human nationalities, Then they got into going into other forms of life, even down to, animals and that type of thing. And the fact that, this J-Rod his skin was pinkish, but a little bit rough, and that kind of stuff. Not, not horrible looking, or to me, he didn't look horrible looking. Some of the guys, that was in the particular groups that I was in, they never even made it, as far as I was concerned. When they gave you the psychological question, I just answered them the way I felt, and I had no problem, And that's what they wanted to know, if you'd become, like, hey, here's an alien, he's from here, and I don't know what, one of those kind of things, But it never bothered me, it didn't amount to much.
So what kind of scientific advice he would give the crew that was building or back engineering these?
Basically, it was only engineering advice or science advice.
And the spirit that I judged him by was what I was feeling from him, from his heart, from his mind. And I judged him by his relationship with his child, by how he regarded his mother, by all of these things that we choose to regard in the human family to make decisions about each other. the same things. I mean, these common things were still present. There
So,
were very, many uncommon aspects to their society, to the negating of emotion and the negating of personal names out in society, but still being carried within families. There was a common theme to the human family, which was still extant in his time, and I used that as part of my prudent discernment of him, or God, I hope it was, that he was a good human being.
so you assisted him in going through the Stargate.
I pushed the Segway type transport set on the stroller. They looked like bell jars almost, over the top of Segway type strollers, where you could, almost waist height, where the bar was, where you could push it in whatever direction, and it took very little effort to move it. And he asked me to go home.
So you pushed him, and
Did.
what happened to you when you pushed him?
I pushed forward, then the next feeling was a feeling of numbness. For a brief moment, I thought I really screwed up, maybe killed myself or whatever, because I literally felt numb everywhere. Then I remember a flash of gray, and then I was seated coughing on a block about 20, 30 meters away, maybe. And I had people rushing up to me, still over dramatically, actually cocking an automatic firearm at me, screaming at me. And I was grabbed, picked up from the block, and taken over and said, you're under arrest. And I mean, I committed a violation of the protocols, and I was being threatened with weapons to my head and things like that.
So
What did he say to you? And are you a spy? And they were just acting paranoid. No, I wasn't a spy. I just shoved him into the Stargate, and he went bye-bye. And that's essentially what happened.
How did Majestic react after that to you?
Very angry, including the people with whom I'm the closest, save the one present. Very angry toward me.
And how do they act? How does the Majestic act when it's angry? I guess this
Well,
gets back to haven't you been tortured? I mean, isn't this right?
I don't call it torture, aside from the fact that I've been falsely imprisoned. That's torture. I was, for a couple periods of time, put at S4 in level 3 and basically told that's where you are for now.
Level 3 meaning, was it a cell?
No, it was one of the rooms, one of the small suites, if you will, which were originally put in. There's 12 of them in this trident. There's a 3 groups of 4, and I was put in Bay Unit 1 over to the left, and it was essentially, it contained all the amenities. I could ask for food, got anything I wanted, except for I couldn't leave. There was no freedom. I consider that torture. The other items are acts of unkindness. And acts of unkindness from Majestic can range from everything from psychological unkindness, being rude to you, to being threatening, to being physically harmful. And I have been beaten, I have been slapped, I have been physically restrained, meaning handcuffed, and beaten and slapped. I have been put under lights. Well, hell, I had friends doing that to me. But I had, put under intense lights and while being handcuffed, as in interrogated. I have been told to shut my mouth to the point where 2 people grabbed me. One shoved me down onto the floor of a garage, and the other one stomped on and broke my hand.
So, and these were the members of Majestic that carried out these
Yes.
attacks?
Yes,
In other words,
not
they
the-
didn't
not the
hire
J
someone?
members. Not the J members. These are operatives,
Operatives.
as in security personnel. Yeah.
I see. So not the 1 through 12, but
Oh, no,
people that work for
none
them.
of them have laid an unkind hand on me ever. Great affection, if anything, out of them.
But they were under
Then again, one can
orders.
show great affection to a pet.
Okay, so you were viewed as a pet by some of them, but you were also
I'm not saying that. I'm
mistreated
saying
on
that.
their orders.
I'm not saying I was viewed as a pet. I'm saying I don't know what they're truly carrying in their hearts, in their minds. And so there exists a possibility that affection can be granted either honestly or disingenuously. It can be granted person to person on the same level, or as an act of condescending.
Well, let's back up a tiny bit.
Well,
Majestic.
yes, she brought up the name Tennant. George Tennant. Oh, I better watch my mouth.
That's the way I hit the
I
name.
just started talking here too much.
I know.
George Tenet was a former director of Central Intelligence for the United States of America. Now we're moving on.
Okay. So, but what you were saying about Majestic has got me interested.
Sorry.
That's okay. You're basically saying that Majestic is operating as independent of the government. Is that correct? Or are they operating
Yes and no.
under the?
Yes and no. They were set independent of direct presidential authority as far back as the late 40s. However, there's more than one individual who has set as a member of the 12 who are intimately involved with the United States government to include its highest levels.
Okay, and so those people were actually.
Okay, it's time to put the tap dancing shoes on.
Okay, those people were actually ordering you to be, as a result, let's say, of this sort of overstepping the line, pushing J-Rod into the Stargate. They were ordering you to be sequestered, to be beaten or harmed in some
By
way.
the time that happened, all the beatings happened prior to that. By the time that happened, there was basically, they didn't know what to do with me. It took everybody so by surprise. Me too. What I did. They didn't know what to do. And so they really didn't. I mean, I got hauled around there at the site for a while, and I got hauled back here to the U.S. But I was basically, after that, just told, go home. They didn't know what to do.
So is this why you've been released from Majestic, is because of this incident?
No. It was coming near the end of my time, my usefulness, basically, anyway, aside from being almost an elder statesman with them, because I'd been around for like 20 years. My physical condition has gotten worse. Not well, physically. So I would not be of any use inside of a laboratory.
Okay, but why is there? I understand that there's been some kind of adjournment, and now there's a new body, and it's not going to be comprised of the same people as the old body.
True.
So why? Why have they changed members? What's the motivation?
There's a switch over between two secret societies going on. One is handing reins over to the other, and it has been long planned. However, it's not been long known by me, but it's been long planned, probably decades. I'm certain it has to have been for decades.
So Majestic is ruled by a secret society, is what you're saying.
Well, Majestic has been the most famous, next to probably the Freemasons, secret society of itself. And there are many of the Freemasons who inhabit the Majestic as a consequence of their relationships. The two things are happening at the same time. And so their philosophies then, the philosophies of these associated secret societies like the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, are then imparted into the secret society known as the Majestic.
So what's the quarrel between?
You bring who you are to wherever you are.
Sure. But what's the quarrel between, say, the Majestic Society or group and the Illuminati?
That is a real good, and it's the best question to be asked. Even more importantly than the differences between the J-Rods, because this impacts us, I think, now. Many members of the upper echelon, and I don't mean the hard-working people who work on construction sites, for God's sakes, but many people who are in the upper echelon of the Masonic movement, both York and Scottish Rite, have accepted a philosophy which is Luciferian in context and history. Many of the people who are not directly then involved with the Majestic, who are also associated with that Luciferian philosophy, have rubbed up against each other for decades, probably even longer. So somewhere along the line in history, there was a schism between those individuals who have accepted the Luciferian history, Luciferian philosophy, mixed with other secret society people who have not, that ended up in the Majestic, and people who have accepted a Luciferian, almost like a different denomination, if you will, accepted a Luciferian philosophy, who are not associated with the Majestic. In other words, we've got dirty coins on both sides.
Okay. And when you say a Luciferian
Now,
philosophy,
meaning a materialistic, and for lack of a better term, when it comes to the actual European Illuminati, satanic philosophy, where they've given their lives, their families, their sacred honor to this satanic thought of creating a world order under the person that they consider the true God, which would be a Luciferian figure. Now, these people have also, separating them from the dirty coins in the Majestic side, these people have also been accepting of the influence of the P45 rogues, who want to justify their own history by our demise of moving from timeline 1 over to timeline 2, the catastrophe. And so the differences between the Majestic group, some of which there have been these Luciferians mixed in, and the true Illuminati.
This brings part 5 to an end. One can't help but compare Bill Cooper discussing the Illuminati and Dan talking about good versus evil. J. Rod was described like many of us have heard, with large eyes and short stature. Many of you, like myself, may have found it fascinating that the alien's genitalia was in the shape of an electrical socket, as shown in the sketch taken from Dan's description below. Stay tuned for part 6 of the Dan Burisch interview.